So yeah, we've hit 12. So let's get started. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Gweagal people, the traditional custodians of the land in which we're hosting this session from today, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which you are all logging in from today as well. And I'd also like to extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'd like to let you know that we're recording this session for the folks at home. And there'll be the slides sent out as well, so you'll be able to review the content and take notes and such later. So this is the second of 3 pre-bootcamp events for the 2022 Moonshot International Space Challenge. And I'm here today with the Microsoft Azure Space team. Today they'll be running a session with us. They'll be running through the 2 challenges and details on the Planetary Computer, as well as the Azure passes, as well as the general Azure overview. A quick important note for those out there: if you are interested in either of the Planetary Computer challenges, please assemble your team and let us know ASAP, as it takes around 24 hours to gain access, and if that's happening at 5 p.m. on Friday when Bootcamp opens, you'll have lost half your time, so please let us know as soon as possible. And also a quick note, tomorrow we'll be running the third pre-bootcamp session, and it's with our incredible Moonshot mentor, Alan Jones. It's a pitching / through storytelling event, and if you're planning to win this thing, please come along, as you'll be learning how to pitch your projects to the judges in a way that's clear, concise, and compelling. And this will be hosted on Discord like this one as well. So I'll hand it over to the Microsoft team now, and they'll be taking us through their session.
Hello, how are we? Sorry, just hitting various mute buttons. I'm Nick, I'm from Microsoft. I'm joined by a bunch of my colleagues today. So we have Alex, we have Jason, we have Georgina, we have Kathy. They'll speak throughout the day. But today we just wanted to sort of have a chat to you about sort of Microsoft, our space program, the challenges that we presented, Azure, some of the startup stuff. Just sort of give you a high-level introduction to what we do. So really happy to be part of Moonshot's program and their bootcamp. We think it's a really exciting program to help mature the Australian space industry, to build businesses, to sort of grow the Australian space industry. So really happy to be here. Jump on to the next slide, please, Alex. So I'll give a quick intro of Azure Space first. So Azure Space is an effort that's been going on within Microsoft for a few years. It's really how do we apply cloud computing to the space industry. And what we're trying to do there is democratize access to space data, space technologies, space communications. And we see it as being a critical part to our mission statement about empowering every person on and off the planet to achieve more. Jump to the next slide. So there's sort of 3 or 4 big areas that our space program focuses on. The first is global connectivity. Global connectivity is how do we connect anyone or anything around the world at any security level into our cloud. Here, we are obviously not launching our own satellites to provide satellite communication. So for us, we're partnering with leaders in the industry to provide this capability. So people like SES, people like Starlink, and there's a whole bunch of others. But it's really about extending our cloud and the edge of our cloud to anywhere in the world. The second is geospatial analytics, which is how do we turn the massive amounts of data and knowledge generated by space assets into things that can be used by other industries. And this sort of spans really across 3 areas. The first is collecting the data, the second is analysing the data, and then the third part is disseminating that data. So on collecting the data, we have a product called Azure Orbital, which is ground stations as a service. So again, we are partnering with leaders in ground stations, so people like KSAT and Viasat, and bringing their infrastructure into Azure so you can book it through the Azure portal and schedule a pass with ground station resources on Azure. But then we're also building our own ground stations in strategic locations around the world. On that second part about analysing the data, again, we are not launching satellites to collect that data. Similarly, we cannot create analytics for every single use case out there. We just don't have the people power and we don't have the knowledge, quite frankly. So for us, it's about, again, how do we partner with leaders in the industry? How do we create an ecosystem that allows people to bring their data, to bring their layers of analytics, and sort of create an ecosystem of data? This is largely where our challenge is going to focus on, so we'll get into that a bit more. And then the last part of the geospatial work is disseminating that information. So we have collaboration tools like Teams, we have collaboration tools like Power BI. How do we take the knowledge and insights generated by all this geospatial data and get it into the hands of everyone? And then the last two areas, Azure Space and emulation and synthetics, are largely focused on satellite developers. So how do we take all that interesting work that we have done for desktop developers, now for cloud developers, and take that to the space industry to enable them to build things quicker? So things like emulation and synthetics of Earth observation satellites. So being able to generate what a satellite would see in real time for synthetic data, and then start streaming that to hardware and software in the loop, understanding how that hardware and software would process that data, and then pumping it back into the emulation engine. So that's a sort of a very high level view of what we're doing. But if we sort of jump a bit deeper into the geospatial work, this is really where the challenge is going to focus on today. So I sort of touched on those three areas before about sort of collecting the data, analysing that data, and then disseminating that data. But we're partnered with some of the leaders in this industry. So Esri, I would say the de facto platform for a lot of geospatial work. Orbital Insights, there's another one, Black Shark AI, which we've recently released some prep about. But the last part on there, Orbital Analytics for Azure Synapse, is a reference architecture about how do you take geospatial data, connect that with Azure services, and be able to do that processing in a cloud native way and an efficient way using cloud services. So we have provided that reference architecture as part of that challenge. And you can go online and sort of read about how that comes together, how it can be used. So if you do want to build a product in this, we highly suggest you take a look at that reference architecture, and we can provide some links for that afterwards. Done to the next slide. So again, this is a very high level view of what that reference architecture is. On the top left is the data sources. So it can be bring your own data from either satellites that you could hypothetically put it up there, or other industry partners that we have. But the main part we see for this challenge is the Planetary Computer, which we'll touch on a bit later. But taking that data and then being able to ingest it, transform it, do AI and analysis using containerized workloads, and then pumping that into visualization tools like Power BI and Teams. Again, sort of we'll post the link to some of this reference architecture stuff later, so you can take a bit more of a close look at it. Next slide. So for our analytics work, we see a huge amount of applications in a number of different industries. And these are all industries where Microsoft has great partners and we do great work, but I'll touch on a few. I think environmental monitoring is a really obvious one for geospatial data, being able to understand at a holistic level about what the Earth is doing, but then also zoom in on specific areas. So looking at things like greening in urban areas, looking at things like water levels in lakes, sort of how landscapes are changing due to erosion. Um, then sort of working with governments. I think everyone sort of knows how federal governments use some of this data, but if we start looking at things like local governments and councils, using satellite imagery to understand if there has been building work that has been done that hasn't had approval. Things like looking at cracks in roads to understand how they have been changing. There's also other interesting use cases. If, for example, if people that might build pools or people that might install solar panels, companies, and being able to assess where their target markets might be. On the right-hand side, I think there's a few really interesting ones. So, for example, being able to understand how much oil is in a tank that is potentially at a dock, being able to understand how much mining ore has been extracted from a mine by looking at piles on the ground or levels in trains or how deep a ship is in the water. You can then start doing really interesting things about potentially analysing stock prices, potentially analysing commodity prices and trying to figure out what they're trying to do. And then on the very right-hand side, object detection. But Microsoft is in this really unique position where we have a great heritage in gaming technology. So things like Xbox, being able to do gaming in the cloud. So how can we start leveraging some of that technology, some of that ability to do rendering of objects and start creating synthetic data? So one of the big, I'd say, barriers for a lot of this stuff is being able to get labeled images, particularly when you start looking at objects like planes that aren't that common. So if we can start using synthetic data and that Xbox and gaming technology to create synthetic objects that have synthetic images that have synthetic planes in them, we can then start pre-labeling these images on a per pixel basis and feed that into the training of our algorithms and sort of create really impactful stuff. And then the next slide, I think this is a really cool test case that sort of shows how a lot of this stuff comes together in a really unique environment. So on the International Space Station, spacewalks are a thing that occurs regularly, but they're also a very high-risk situation. You have this astronaut that goes out, does a whole bunch of spacewalks, uses their hands, touches a lot of metal objects with sharp edges. And when they come back in, what happens is an astronaut takes a whole bunch of photos of those gloves, sends them back down to Earth, and then someone sitting at a desk looks through every single photo to make sure that there aren't any damages to that glove. Obviously, very manual process, very time-consuming process, uses a whole lot of communication bandwidth from the space station back down to Earth. So we created a demo where we trained a computer vision model to be able to do that analysis on the space station. So taking a whole bunch of photos of that gloves and then feeding it into a computer vision algorithm that then assesses the quality of the gloves. So I think a really cool test case. I think anything in the International Space Station is extremely cool. And there's a video that we'll share later that you can go and watch in your own time about that a bit more. And that wraps.
Are you able to share your screen full size in speaker view so that we don't see the rest of your desktop?
Sure we can. Alex?
I thought I was already, but I do have two slides at home on different monitors, so maybe... All right, let me stop sharing and I'll reshare. Sorry about that, Tim.
Much better.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Okay, so over to me. Now I just wanted to touch really quickly for you on Microsoft for Space Startups Australia. Off the back of the launch of Azure Space a year or so ago, we saw a need here in Australia for a startups and entrepreneur-focused program that leverages the best of Microsoft for Startups, which is an existing program, but we really wanted to take that and tailor it for the space industry. I guess the reason we did that is we see the industry is growing across pretty much all key sectors, and we want to invest to help grow the Australian space industry. And we see startups are absolutely critical to building that ecosystem in space here in Australia. We want to provide startups with support for their business. So that's you guys listening today, and really want to be with you as you start your journey with Microsoft. And we see space startups in our program already, innovating in technology areas that Azure Space is driving and enabling. So a couple of examples in our program today. We've got Spiral Blue. We've got Office of Planetary Observations. We've got Fortify Edge, who do cybersecurity in space. We've got a whole range of startups who are innovating in the space and space-related industries to drive innovation and drive change across multiple industries. So a bit about the program. The AKA link here is where you can find out more information and apply. Who is the program for? It's pretty relaxed. Anyone engaged in developing a software-based product, Australia's space and space-related scene. We're looking for companies that are under 7 years old because, those younger companies are the ones that we see really need the leg up to get started. And we've also got, just to not have received 10,000 of free Azure services in the past. So it's really your first intro into Azure, and we start the journey with you through this program. The benefits include up to 150,000 in Azure credits across a range of tiered offers aligned to what stage your startup or company is at. Also get access to Office 365 and Microsoft Teams, so productivity and collaboration tools. Dynamics 365 is Microsoft's business applications suite of services. And then a number of developer tools around GitHub Enterprise, Power Platform, and Visual Studio. You also get technical support available 24/7. And at certain levels, you'll also get access to one-on-one technical advice to help you as you start out architecting and designing, and then ultimately, launching your solution on the Azure cloud. We also have go-to-market and co-sell opportunities and connections into the global Azure Space team, where the core engineering for the product is taking place, as well as a mentor program with Microsoft specialists. And that mentor program, we're hearing from lots of different startups as well as industry companies are saying it's that mentor piece that is so important to support space startups as they're getting off the ground. So I'll hand over to Kathy now to talk through the mentor network.
Hey everyone, I'm Kathy. I'm with Microsoft for Startups. I live in Sydney and do indeed look after all of the startups across our mainstream program and our really relatively new space startups program too. So the mentor network is extremely valuable, not least because, one of the most valuable but challenging things for founders to find is a strong mentor, particularly when your industry is so nuanced and specialized that, finding a mentor with the expertise that you need is really critical to unearth. So what we've done is sort of done that within the realms of Microsoft and constellated some really specific experts from around the traps. And what it does is it allows our space startups to scale up your team with technical sub-ins and, all sorts of different things. So I'm just going to talk to the, I think the slides have gone, but I am going to talk to them. And then once I have that prompt, I'll be able to tell you exactly what we have going on here. So what we think is, first of all, that it should be easy for startups to access the teams and resources that are going to be able to help you. And I think with a company like Microsoft or any other huge tech company, it really is hard to find the sort of front door, first of all, to ask what it is that you need, and then to like really drill into the very specific areas that you want. So I hope you guys are all sort of good oral people and can do this without visual cues. It will see how good a talker I am.
I've just shared my screen, Kathy. So if you want to
cool.
check into my stream, it should be there to view.
Pardon? What was that last bit, Jason?
If you click on my stream, your slide's there, ready to go.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
We're extremely efficient in Teams. Not as efficient in Discord.
All right, look, I can't see maybe if I just share my slides, how about that? I'll just keep talking so as we don't hit a dead spot. So what we have been able to do is make sure that all of the people that are there locally and internationally are available to our startups. And what that looks like is a couple of different realms of places that you can connect once you're in the program. We have on a Discord channel, cloud solution architects, and there's a big range of disciplines. We have developers, AI, ML, digital app and innovation, infrastructure, Azure technology, an ISV team and product development. And that just allows you this really quick kind of, quick question landing pad. Got a question, just need some help to answer it straight up. Want to bring a few people in my team in, quick fire result for either the length of the program or possibly connecting with somebody that might be interested to help a little bit more. And then we have another realm of really specific space specialist resources. And these are people that we curated from in and around Australia, New Zealand, not too much further beyond, because it really helps to keep these experts local, to have a really good understanding of the technical landscape, business landscape, but also the ability to sort of go global and procure information or other team members from other places that you might need to go. And within this realm, we've got people from Azure Space, IoT, Planetary Computer, industry specialists from government and well beyond, AI for Earth, edge processing, digital twins, RF simulation, and mixed reality and space. This is not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to keep it succinct so that you know that it's not overwhelmingly broad and vast and that you're just kind of going to land in a puddle of people and go, I don't know where to look. We do kind of have them sorted. And to be able to access that, we are the front door for Moonshot and your team, the people on this call. But additionally, we also have a group of space startup buddies, and they have put their hands up because they're super interested in the industry and have various levels of background in space and space related business. So what their job is to do is to meet you directly and take you where you need to go. So those two previous networks, the Discord and the space specialist resources, if it's not super easy to get to them straight away, what we have in place are individuals who will hear out what your problem is, what your ask is, and chaperone you through exactly to the right team or person. And their background is in some really different places, just to make sure that we really capture everything that you guys might have backgrounds in. So we've got IoT again, government, We've got legal people in there because that's something that I think everyone can do with a freebie on. If you want to talk contracts or licensing or something, and you really can't afford to get a lawyer in, or it's not necessary to get a lawyer in, just a bit of mentorship around that. We've got people from all around the traps within Microsoft who are willing to sort of put in the time to make sure that you've got what it is that you need. There's pricing and licensing, sales buddies, manufacturing, and industry CTO. So again, it's not exhaustive, and I will share these slides with you because we weren't able to sort of go along with me as I talked. But what the slides will do will be able to help you sort of visualize that they sit in 3 separate areas. And what's really simple is for you guys to just say, that's exactly what I want to do right there. Let's go for it. And we can quickly organize that. I think that's kind of all I wanted to cover in the mentorship pieces. But I'll hand back to Alex Jason. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Over to you, Jason.
No worries, Kathy. Thanks for that. And what I'm going to talk about next, I'm along here today with one of my colleagues, Georgina, and we're going to provide a bit of an overview of Azure. And this is going to be fairly high level. There's about 1 million slides in this deck, so I'm not going to touch on all of them, but they'll be sent out so people can run through them in your own time as you need, because we don't have a full 2 hours to do the full run through of this entire deck. So I'm Jason Purcell. I'm based in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a program manager in the Fast Track for Azure team. Our Fast Track team, we're an enablement team, so we work direct with customers and partners and all sorts of folks to help you get up and running in the Azure platform. Georgina's on the line with me. She's one of our engineers that gets more hands-on in the environments than I typically do. And I would say she's one of our IoT specialists, and has done quite a bit of work with some of our existing Azure Space customers. So, Microsoft and the cloud, there's quite a few components to it. What we're going to talk about today is Azure. You'll notice that we've also got Office 365, Dynamics 365, and the entire Power Platform that are included in Microsoft Cloud as well. I'm from the Azure team. I'm going to talk about Azure. So when we look at Azure as a whole, it is a global service. We've got 63 regions around the world. I think we actually have more than that now, but it's always growing. It's always expanding. It's an extremely secure platform. And over on the right, I did want to include this slide, particularly because it does talk about a number of the compliance offerings and the space folks that we generally deal with typically have some regulatory requirements that they need to comply with. So you'll see there's a lot of the global ISO compliance levels there, and also for us in this region, there's a couple of key ones, especially if you're working with the likes of defence, where we've got that IRAP unclassified or the IRAP protected offerings as well. So there are a couple of things that Georgina and I talk to a lot of our customers about as they're beginning their journey in Azure or progressing through and building on what you've already got. So in Azure, it is massive these days. If you can see the poster on my wall behind me, that's from 2012 when there was like 17 services in Azure. But these days, there's heaps of stuff. On this slide, you can see we've got our edge devices. So that's probably interesting to a lot of folks here around Azure Stack, Data Box for big data transfers, Azure Sphere, the cool stuff with Connect and HoloLens. And where we work with a lot of customers these days is in the serverless space, because a lot of the reason that folks go to the cloud is that they don't really want to deal with that on-prem infrastructure or need to manage it and things like that. So we've got a lot of services available in that, where you only really need to worry about the workload that you care about, rather than everything that's underlying all the software licensing and keeping the hardware online and the warranties and service that goes along with that. And then for those that still like their virtual machines and having that lower level access to what everything's running on, We do have the IaaS level as well, or infrastructure, as you can see there down, with all the compute, the networking, storage, all the underlying components. So with that, over the top, for the overall management, we've got a few options there as well. So we can operate out of Visual Studio, we can run it out of GitHub, we can leverage Power BI apps and use Power BI as a presentation layer. Lots and lots of flexibility and a lot of options for folks to take advantage of. So while I talk about Azure a lot, what we see out in the marketplace is that not everybody goes full cloud. And you'll see from this slide that a lot of folks are in that hybrid space. And Georgina and I, when we're working with folks, they may have a multi-cloud strategy where they're working with Google, they're working with Amazon, they're working with Microsoft, and across all of those. But we're comfortable working with everyone in that space. Now, in terms of what that looks like coming from what you may be comfortable or familiar with in your traditional IT sense, you'll see we've got a good relationship between all of those components. So in the foundational Azure services, we've got Azure Stack for those that still want to have some of that kit within their physical reach. In the data space, we've got a huge array of coverage across many different types of both relational and non-relational databases. Networking, stacks of capability. Identity is a really big piece as well for us. So if you're familiar with Active Directory on-prem, so to speak, Azure Active Directory is a really nice flow on from that. And then that security and management, that's one of our key pillars really, and is core to everything that we do. I spoke a little bit before about the number of regions that we've got. So this slide gives you a bit of an overview of how many of those really exist. But one of the cool points I like to talk about with folks is the actual length of the fibre runs around the globe. So 130,000 miles of fibre and subsea cable are in use connecting the services that we bring to the globe. And I'll continue on because we've got plenty to talk about. In terms of reliability, you'll see those 60 plus regions. We've got the global network. If you are needing to work in that VM space, we've got 150 VM size options. So work that my team does, we help customers decide, okay, what's going to be best fit as well. Open source is another big thing that a lot of folks generally don't associate Microsoft with, but we've made some fantastic strides in I'd say the past decade, but past 5 years or so. So if you're a big Linux fan and that's what you know and love, we can more than likely satisfy those needs. And at the top end of town, those folks that have the very specific requirements or may have a lot of legacy and history in the on-prem compute environment, those services such as SAP and VMware and the Oracles and NetApps and all the HPC side of the world, we cater for that as well these days. So like I mentioned, it's a massively comprehensive platform these days. Georgina, is there anything you want to add while I go along? Or if there is, just jump in. All good. So, in terms of the journey to the cloud, if there's those of you on the line that have, you've got experience on-prem with some traditional IT infrastructure, or even if you're working in one of the other cloud providers at the moment, you may be looking at Azure, you may have a bit of a migration path to come in. For a lot of the startups and other folks that we're working with, they're more of a digital native or a cloud first greenfield customer, and a lot of folks we've worked with there have basically stood up and created their business and their organization in cloud first, cloud native. And a lot of those folks, we tend to find that they are working more in that serverless space and in the app side, trying to get to that low code or no code, well, can't really get to no code, but that low code space, making people's lives easy and just trying to get the quickest return on that investment that you're putting into the platform. In terms of hybrid apps, we can cover that as well. That's out there as well. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in the IO space here. But like I mentioned before, in that open source space, Linux does run great on Azure. And within my team, we've got a lot of folks that, funnily enough, they're not Windows first. They are literally Linux first. That's what they know and love. Georgina's probably smiling and laughing, thinking about those many members of our team. But as you can see here, yeah, more than 50% of the VM cores running in Azure are on Linux. Yeah, like I mentioned, that open source space, you can see on this slide here, there is stacks. There's more than I can possibly talk about in the time that's available. But yeah, if you've used it, it's more than likely that you can reuse it in Azure. In terms of hybrid, that's another piece as well. Like I mentioned, we've got customers that work across multi-cloud, that might have a multi-cloud strategy, and those that have still got their traditional on-prem infrastructure that they're working with as well. We can leverage services such as Azure Arc to provide a single management pane across the top of all of those services. So that's, if you're in that space and that's something you're interested in, check that out because it is pretty cool. And on the back of that, some of the more interesting stuff, and I know that's stuff that Nick loves, in the Azure Stack portfolio, and that does come into place with a lot of our Azure Space services as well. Some cool kit there, and it just really extends the capability of our cloud platform out to the areas where traditionally it may not have been able to be reaching. I mentioned the database services that we cover early being quite comprehensive. You'll see here that we've got the likes of the good old Microsoft SQL, so Azure SQL database. There's been a massive uptake in Postgres, I would say as well. It's very popular at the moment. MySQL's out there, MariaDB, and yeah, Cosmos is also available for those that need it or want it or like it. It's there. In terms of analytics at scale, now a lot of the customers that I've been working with, leveraging the geospatial data and the like, have had models that align pretty closely to this slide, where we've got that ingestion of the data coming through. We're leveraging the data services to maintain or transform that data in a particular way, prepare it, get the models right, and then literally serving it out at the back end. So I've done a bit of work with the folks at CSIRO on their Space Cows project as well, and yeah, literally uses all of the components that are represented on this slide. That's some cool stuff. There's some news stories out there about that as well. I'll see if I can throw that into one of the chat channels later for people to check out, because yeah, cool project name, Space Cows, and some nice services happening around that as well. So Power BI, we've got that in there. A lot of my customers are using this as their presentation layer these days. You can get some awesome reports and some fantastic visualizations out of the back end. And in the analytics space, Synapse is one of our solutions that's come out, and yeah, there's a number of components that packages together to provide a shorter path or a less complicated path to the end solution for you. So we're up to the IoT space. I'm probably going to lean on Georgina a little bit here because this is one of her little specialty areas. But in the IoT space, Georgina, did you want to have a word here?
Yeah, I will. We've got a few slides on this and we'll run through it super quickly. But yes, as Jason mentioned, I'm a member of his team and I do focus quite a lot on our IoT services. The nice thing about IoT, and Nick has mentioned it already, is a lot of what we're trying to do with Azure and with Azure Space is looking at how we can push Azure to the far edge. I really like that term. And so a lot of the work that I do with customers is about how we can be running cloud services, or how we can be connecting devices to the cloud at the far edge. So one of the things about this is that Azure IoT really is an extensible, secure, scalable platform. One of the nice things about being Microsoft is we have a history of, deploying and managing computers at scale, and we're able to take a lot of those learnings and apply that to this emerging industry of IoT. We have a range of industries that we work within and industries that we have accelerators and, I suppose, reference architectures for. But the real power of Azure IoT is in the services that we have, the extensibility, and we provide that underlying set of tools that will help you to build devices, to connect devices in a way that is highly scalable and secure. And those are some real challenges when you're trying to implement that from scratch. So we want to work with you to build out these platforms to make them really powerful. Jason, if you click to the next slide. I'm not going to go into this at all, but this is a architecture I wanted to include just to show the full pipeline of how you can create, you can connect edge devices, and how they can be not just a data source, but also a data sink, and that you can push some of that intelligence and power of the cloud back onto the edge. So in this particular scenario, we can see a camera, we can see a video analyzer module that we actually have running on an edge device, and then we can see the workflow of how you can automate a pipeline to collect imagery, to train a model, and then to push an improved model back to the edge. So I thought I'd just include that in there as a nice, real quick reference architecture.
Real world stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun one. To the next slide, and I think the point that this slide makes is, yes, there are thousands of Azure IoT certified devices, and we have thousands of partners that build devices using Azure IoT services. But what I think this really speaks to is the extensibility of the Azure IoT platform. You can build devices leveraging something like Azure IoT plug and play that mean that when your customers are adopting those devices can, as the name would suggest, almost automatically start talking to the cloud and start working for your customers out of the box. But I don't think that that's actually the most important piece of this story. The most important piece, and the piece that we work on a lot with a bunch of our space partners, is the extensibility piece, and how you can bring your platform, you can bring your network, and we can build a way to connect that into Azure that will allow your customers, or allow you to still have a centralized management plane for your devices, for the data that you're collecting, and get some really rich insights from all of that. So yeah, that's a really 1,000-meter view of Azure IoT, but I hope that's helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Georgina. Put you on the spot there. Killed it. Awesome. So I know we're running light on time at the moment. There's a bunch more for me to get to, but yeah, with Azure, you can basically build it on your terms. We've got that many services available, lots of flexibility in the platform, and a lot of tools that are available to help you do that. There's a whole section on here on the dev journey, the app dev journey, talking about the tools that we can use, what's out there in the wild. Visual Studio, as you would expect, is a big thing with Microsoft as well. And these days, Visual Studio Online, that's where most of my team are spending their days as well. So I just might ask the rest of the team while I'm here, have there been any questions that have come through while I've been running through this so far? Or we're leaving questions to the end, right? Okay, I'm almost done, so I'll just flick through these quickly. GitHub, that's another piece. If we have customers that are coming to us these days and asking around, okay, where do I start? GitHub is a really good place that we do recommend, and we can provide guidance on that as well. So new projects, collaboration, you name it, that's where we work from. And my team in particular, when we're providing code samples and examples of how to go about things, it is the repo of choice for us. More about GitHub, I'm sure everybody has heard of it. And in the interest of time, we've got a little bit in here about Power Apps as well. I've had a lot of our customers leveraging Power Apps just because it's an easier way to get that end use case out in the public. I've been working with some government organisations recently that have been delving deeper into that space as well, where they haven't had the biggest dev teams in the world, but they've ended up with some really cool solutions out on the other end of things. And yeah, quite intuitive, fairly easy to use. So something to check out if that's of interest to you as well. Like I alluded to right back at the start when I started talking, governance in the cloud, it's a massive thing for Microsoft. So everything that we do needs to be secure, it needs to be well managed, needs to be well governed. You may be interested to know that us as Microsoft, due to the security and the compliance and the trust that we have with our customers, we don't have access to any of your data or your services that you stand up in your own Azure subscriptions. So some folks find that interesting, but it's the way we operate. Microsoft runs on trust. You may have heard that term before, but it's literally real. So in terms of that governance, my fast track team, we run dedicated governance sessions where folks can come along and hear us talk about how we go about that, things to take into account, how to make sure you don't paint yourselves into a corner and end up in a bill shock type situation. We operate in that space every day. Along with that, the foundations of all of the guidance that my team provides is based on the cloud adoption framework and also the well-architected framework. Now, these are huge topics, but this is more for your awareness to let you know that they are out there. We'll share some relevant links with you that are more easy to digest in your own time. Yeah, and Microsoft Learn, another absolutely brilliant tool, and my team contributes heavily to the Learn modules that are out there. And the good thing about this is you can learn at your own pace. Some modules might only be an hour long, but you can take that down into bite-sized chunks as well as you're going and focus in on any really specific topics that you need to know about. Lots of folks that I work about, I ask them about how they learn, and these days some more interesting answers for me, because I've been in the industry for a century. is that, oh yeah, if I need to know how to do it, I'll go and look it up on YouTube and figure it out as I go. So that's a new one for me compared to the old school way of going and sitting in courses and stuff like that. But Learn is a fantastic resource for bite-sized chunks and learn what you need when you need it. Quick Start Setup, this is something which we usually go through and do a decent demo on, actually running you through, but if you log into the Azure portal, up in the top dialog box, you can literally type Quick Start Setup. It's got an icon there as well, but I like typing. So that'll take you through. There's an Azure setup guide there as well, which has some awesome links, which are absolutely fantastic for folks that are just getting started in the platform as well. And with that, Nick, I got through. You've got like 8 minutes left. I'm sorry, mate.
I work with 8 minutes. Oh, good. No stress. Hey, really appreciate.
You want me to change slides?
Yeah, really appreciate the presentations from everyone. Hopefully it was useful, but we thought we'd have a chat about the challenges that we proposed for the bootcamps. So all of this stuff is online, so it's more intended to be a high-level overview, and then go and check them out online, ask us any questions if you have them. Go to the next slide, please, Jason. Awesome. So Eye in the Sky Challenge. I don't think it is a debate anymore that climate change is real. And we as humans and as organizations and as companies desperately need to change the way we're doing things to not only halt that, but try and also reverse it. Data is a key part of this conversation, and it will be a key part of sort of understanding environmental effects and ultimately building solutions for them, and then monitoring how well those solutions are doing. So the objective for this challenge is to build a product to measure, monitor, model, and or manage healthy ecosystems to enable organizations to stop their contribution to the deterioration of ecosystems. This product should be built using the Planetary Computer and using the Azure Orbital Analytics reference architecture. So sort of touching in on a few of those points. So I started talking about environments, but healthy ecosystems are a really important part of climate change and ensuring that we have healthy ecosystems. Microsoft has released each year we release an environmental sustainability report. You can have a look through that. There's a whole section on healthy ecosystems and why we should care about them. The Planetary Computer is it's a few things, but it is a petabyte scale store of environmental data. So Earth observation data, base maps, a whole bunch of other indexes. So there's a really valuable data set there that can be used to help understand healthy ecosystems. And then the Azure Orbital Analytics reference architecture is about how do you take that Planetary Computer data or potentially other data and then build a product on Azure using some of those services to layer those analytics over the top. A few things here to point out. There is no expectation to build a functioning product or an MVP, but if you do want to, getting access to the Planetary Computer can take up to 24 hours. So we recommend that if you do have an interest, you go and sign up for an account on the Planetary Computer as soon as you can, so you have that option to use. The analytics reference architecture is online, so you can download that from GitHub as you please, and the link should be in the challenge. The other thing here is there are a bunch of free services on Azure that you can use, but we've also organized some Azure passes of $50 for people to use throughout these. So if you do want to build something on Azure and leverage those, please speak to the Moonshot team and they can tee you up with a code and get you those credits. And I think they will last 2 months. So you have some time afterwards as well if you want to continue playing with the Azure services and figuring out how you can do this. I think that's an awesome option. And the other part that we're interested in here is building, I guess a technical product is one thing, but building a technical product and having that part of a product or a business that can scale and be part of a mature market that helps us in the long term is also really important. So that's the other part we're interested in. Next slide, please. Cool. So I will caveat this challenge with, this isn't one that we directly made. This actually came to us through the Moonshot people, but sort of inspired by what we're doing. We don't take any credit for this, but we think it's really cool because it's based on similar stuff and you can use very similar sort of technologies for it. But it is to chase down net carbon zero emissions to enable policy. And the challenge is developing a methodology for accessible, publicly available, high-resolution satellite imagery that offers, or that public officials can use to build a national land use map that can measure, monitor, report, and verify carbon sequestration every year. The smaller those pixels, the better. So again, building on that environmental theme, potentially some of the planetary computer can be used here, potentially some of that geospatial reference architecture. Again, you can build this product on Azure if you want, potentially using some of those Azure passes. So, I mean, awesome challenge. Great to see us sort of inspiring other challenges in the environmental world. So, super keen. Would love for you to pick up either one of those challenges and we'll help you however we can. Next slide, please, Jace. Awesome. So this is some of the next steps that I think I've sort of chatted about throughout. Planetary Computer, 24 petabytes of data, so a really rich data source there. It also has APIs, a standard set of APIs to access the data, a compute environment and some other applications. Reference architecture, we'll share the GitHub link, and again, sort of if you do want a pass with some credits in it, you need to chat to the Moonshot team to get set up with one. There are limited passes, so please only request one if you do plan to actually build something, and then also getting access to the Planetary Computer as soon as you can. But all those links are on the challenge, so feel free to check them out. If you have any questions, let us know. Also having a look through the environmental sustainability report is amazing. Next slide, if there is one. Awesome. So in terms of prizes for the first challenge, Blitzscaling is a book that was written by Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn and was involved in eBay and PayPal in the early days, and Chris Yeh. It is one of the books that we refer to all the time at Microsoft about how you can build scalable software products. Also one-on-one mentoring with the Azure Space team about really whatever you want. So it could be your career, space industry, Azure, your company, your product. These are your sessions to use. And then also $1,000 worth of Azure credits as well. So hopefully taking that solution that you thought of during the bootcamp and building that out into a product, into a business, or perhaps it's another idea. Again, sort of super happy to be part of the bootcamp. We really believe in sort of what Moonshot's trying to do here about building businesses, taking ideas from essentially what you're going to figure out in the bootcamp to businesses that can scale globally. So we're absolutely here to support you. Please reach out with any questions. There'll be Microsoft mentors available throughout the bootcamp weekend. I'll throw it back to Sasha. I know that we haven't left any time for questions, so I apologize.
That's all good. Thank you so much to Nick and Jason, Georgina, Kathy, and Alex. That was fantastic. A recording of this will be available. Any questions that you have, throw them in the in either of the challenge channels. And Alex's, or everyone's online. Nick's in orange, so you'll be able to spot him easily. And excellent. So thank you very much, folks. I'll wrap it up here. And yeah, if you have any questions, just post them in the Discord.
I just want to add there, Sasha. First of all, thanks very much, everyone. We also have a really direct email address that gets to all of us, which we'll drop into the channel as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, everyone.